It's July 17th, 1841, and another remarkable event is about to be uncovered by Arion, Rebecca, and Olly, the Retrospectors.
There were two titles for the weekly satirical magazine that published its first issue, Today in History, in 1841. The one that stuck, Punch, a reference to the popular violent puppet, but the full name of Punch magazine, launched today, was Punch or the London Charivari. Now, I had to look up Charivari in the dictionary. It's a noisy mock serenade performed by a group of people to mock an unpopular person.
Is that what mariachis are doing at us whenever we sit on a street corner and eat dinner?
So I think that gives you a sense of the tone of the magazine, and was a reference to the French newspaper Le Charivari, which had inspired it.
Yeah, and the founders of Punch, Henry Mayhew and Ebenezer Landors, what they set out to do was make a humorous current affairs magazine that was less vicious and bawdy than what was on the market. It tended to be very crude caricature and innuendo. And so it's significant that Le Charivari was a satirical newspaper, but crucially one that had been tailored to operate within the strict censorship of political opposition in France. And the owner of that newspaper, Charles Philippon, actually had another newspaper called La Caricature, where they published all their really cutting political jabs, many of them at the expense of King Louis Philippe, and at one point Philippon was actually jailed. Le Charivari was tamer and it included satirical comment on society and culture, as well as a bit of political humour, and that was the vibe Mayhew and Landors went for. And so the issue that went to press had that subtitle, The London Charivari, which again established it as a satirical newspaper, but one that wasn't going to go too far.
And the future looked very, very bleak at the beginning. The circulation stubbornly refused to rise and money quickly ran short, and it began to look as if the team would have the same success with Punch as the editor, Mark Lemon, had had with his previous enterprise, which was a pub that went bankrupt.
They did sell out their initial run of 10,000 copies to the trade on this day, but then it just went largely unnoticed, as London launches have a tendency to do. 10,000 copies in London isn't that big a deal. Though we do have the Morning Advertiser, which praised the, quote, exquisite woodcut, serious and comic, executed in the first style of art, at a price so low that we really blush to name it. But in general, it was ignored. It did better in the provinces. Here's a sample review from the Somerset County Gazette. It is the first comic we ever saw which was not vulgar. It will provoke many a hearty laugh, but never call a blush to the most delicate cheek. Yeah. Which I think because of the name, Punch, that actually settled in the end, it's remembered as being more biting satire than it actually was. This was jokes about the establishment that wouldn't make you blush if you were in the establishment.
Yeah, and that title, Punch, reportedly originally came from a joke at an early meeting about Mark Lemon, that editor. One wag in the office apparently suggested the magazine they were putting together was like Punch, quote, nothing without lemon. But nonetheless, that would be quite complicated to explain on the front cover, so they went with Punch the puppet as the mascot.
It's also such a butt kiss, isn't it? This magazine will be nowhere without you, my glorious leader.
You can see that kind of craven sensibility in the pages was also present in the editorial team. Churning out a weekly magazine at an affordable price that's full of up-to-date features and cartoons. It was expensive if you're just a start-up, and it didn't make a profit. But when, in December 1842, they sold the publication to the publishers Bradbury and Evans, who could use their scale to massively reduce the printing and distribution costs, it did start to make a bit of a splash. At this point, Mayhew stepped down as joint editor-in-chief. Only Lemon would survive the transition. And the very next year, they made what would turn out to be a very significant contribution to the English language. They invented the word cartoon, at least in its modern sense, because prior to this, a cartoon was an anglicisation of the Italian word cartone, which meant a painter's sort of preparatory drawings, which you'll know if you've ever been to the V&A Museum and seen the sign for Raphael's cartoons, hurried down there thinking, these will be great, and be disappointed to find that they are just a bunch of pencil sketches, because that was what the word meant before Punch used it with kind of a tongue-in-cheek grandeur to refer to its satirical drawings.
Yeah, because they'd got very lucky by hiring a guy called John Leech, and from issue 4, Leech became a staff contributor, and his work gradually went on to define the look and tone of the magazine. And his images suited the tone of the publication. During his time at Punch, he produced more than 3,000 drawings, and he really did develop the idea of the cartoon as we know it today. It came about from this meeting for the July 15th, 1843 issue, when when it was decided that the Punch's pencilings, they used to just have one main cartoon in each issue.
It was sort of centerfold, wasn't it, of a satirical drawing?
Exactly. Yeah, and then the rest of it was kind of politics and other stuff. And so they thought that the Punch's pencilings that week would target the upcoming exhibition of fresco designs that was going to take place at the Palace of Westminster. It was viewed as this waste of public money, and in kind of Charles Dickens's London, plagued by, poverty and slums and so on, this exhibition seemed super pompous, and politicians had commissioned it, and Punch saw it as just this self-important, love-in. The image chosen was this picture of ragged Londoners visiting the exhibition, and they looked totally out of place among these grandiose drawings behind them. And so the caption of the work is Cartoon Number 1, Substance and Shadow, talking about the fact that they're looking at these frescoes, and that's how we get the word cartoon.
They also helped boost the use of the word almanac, because in fact it was their big annual issue that really saved the magazine's fortunes. In 1842, they published a sort of Christmas edition at the end of the year, and the circulation went up in that 1 week from 6,000 normal copies to 90,000. Absolutely unprecedented increase. And it just shows that, lots of people like this kind of thing. It's the same nowadays with the Private Eye Annual, isn't it? Lots of people like a small dose of laughing at the authorities, but they don't want that every single week because it's slightly strong medicine. You're either into that or you're not. But once a year, sitting around at Christmas with a sherry, 90,000 people were prepared to buy that, and that kept the magazine afloat.
But what Victorian readers really liked about Punch was that it was considered relatively highbrow and tasteful. Honestly, so tasteful that I think even if you're a history buff, you'll struggle to decipher a lot of it. I think the main way that most people now see Punch is like cartoons in history textbooks.
Yes.
They're usually accompanied by 4 paragraphs explaining what the cartoon's alluding to and what's funny about it.
Yes. This man represents Chartism.
Yeah.
You're like,
The dog that's biting him in the bottom is the paw.
But, it was something, even though it feels slightly difficult to follow, it was something a respectable family could have on the coffee table. But, this also meant that, again, as we've alluded to, the satire could be a bit toothless on certain topics. Often the jabs and unflattering caricatures were aimed at Britain's rivals on the world stage, with Britain and British institutions being portrayed favourably. For instance, even during the potato famine, the Irish were often caricatured as lazy and ignorant, and the cartoonist Leech often depicted them as monkeys in top hats and tails. It wasn't really speaking truth to power or punching up in any significant way.
It was willing to do the job of the state as well.
Yeah.
We should say as the circulation rose, so up to 100,000 by 1910, and in 1948 over 175,000. So, over the next 100 years it really went gangbusters. It was boosting morale. It was doing the state's work. During the wars, rather than taking swipes at the government, the first 2 editors of the 20th century were knighted for their services.
Yeah, and a lot of those sales were across the British Empire. It had really far reach around the world. And circulation actually peaked in the 1940s, which honestly astonished me. It feels like it's so enmeshed with the 19th century. But I guess, there were more people and more magazine readers around by then. And during that sort of century of glory days, it could attract the best talent. It wasn't all gags. There was fiction and essays in there. Contributors included John Betjeman, Sylvia Plath, Henry James, Somerset Maugham, P.G. Wodehouse. William Makepeace Thackeray's Vanity Fair was originally published in Punch as a monthly serial before it was printed as a novel. And actually, we kind of alluded to this before, I think. Teddy Bear, the poem that debuted the character of Winnie the Pooh, also first appeared in Punch.
Yeah, well, the illustrators of Winnie the Pooh, but also Alice in Wonderland, contributed to Punch. John Tenniel and E.H. Shepard. And that illustrative tradition continued even after some of the writers. Well, there were still great writers in the 60s, Alan Corrin and people like that, but in the 60s, the illustrators still were at the top of their game because where else are you going to publish? So Gerald Scarf's in there, Quentin Blake. Until it closed, they still had great illustration.
Yeah, the magazine was bought from Bradbury and Agnew, the publishers, in 1969 by United Newspapers, only the second time it had changed hands, actually. And a promotional booklet in 1974 was really still full of confidence for the future of the publication. It said, it has found new security within a large organisation and an added confidence to combat the gloom of the 1970s with cheerfulness, humour and even optimism. Yet, by the late 80s, circulation had dropped again. They had 3 editors in the space of 3 years. None of them managed to arrest the decline. And in 1992, it closed, and that looked like it was going to be the end of the road for Punch.
But it wasn't, because Mohammed Al-Fayed turned up in 1996 and then killed it for good.
Yeah, exactly.
He came in and thought, right, I can make this work, but he couldn't. There were only 6,000 subscribers left in 2002 when it was shut down for good, which is, interestingly, of course, the number of sales that they were selling back in 1841.
I think it was just that post-war era that was the death knell for Punch generally, because circulation started to decline most heavily from the 1950s. And I can't help but think that this was an era where, the anti-establishment sentiment was fueling really challenging art. And this style of satire just felt really underwhelming. It had become an institution, and that was ultimately the cause of its death.
Yeah, who wants satire with deference in the 60s?
Yes, exactly, yeah. Punch up for once in a while, it's not just punch down.
And so another week of retrospecting ends. But next week begins a day early at Club Retrospectors. Join us now to get an exclusive episode every Sunday. Patreon.com/retrospectors.